Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're so glad you're here. Please get comfy and warm and cuddled, and we will bring you through a Friday night that starts your week off just right. So we're going to start by saying, again, Shabbat Shalom. Shelley could not be here tonight. She had a family emergency, and so she will be back, but she wishes you all a Shabbat Shalom and a hello, and we will bravely carry on without her. We have a wonderful Torah reader, and we have a wonderful person to give a drash during our sermon time. So we are set. We are so lucky, and we have you. So we're going to start with a tune with no words, just to get you into the mood of the evening. Please just turn to someone you do not know and wish them a Shabbat Shalom. And we begin our service on page 120, and Lori and David are going to come up to do our candle blessings on page 120 and 121. You want to come read the English first? It's right here. I have it right here. It's either one.
Here, we're going to split it.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us.
As the brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light.
Olam Borei Peri HaGafen Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu B'mitzvotav V'ratzavanu V'shabbat Kodsho Be'ahava Uvratzon Hinchilanu Zikaron Lema'aseh Bereshit Ki hu yom tehila lemikra kodesh zecher letziat mitzrayim kivanu v'chata ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon Hinchaltanu Baruch Ata Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat L'chaim. You may be seated. On page 127. Let's read responsively on page 127. There are days when we seek things for ourselves and measure failure by what we do not gain. There are days when we exploit nature as if it were a horn of plenty that can never be exhausted. There are days when we act as if we cared nothing for the rights of others. So we embrace Shabbat, day of rest, day of wonder, day of peace. And we turn to page 138. For Lecha Dodi. And that last verse that we do, the Boi V'Shalom, that's a place in the service where it gives you the chance to stand up and look towards the door, metaphorically, for the Shabbat queen, for the Shabbos queen, to enter into our midst. And so just watch Lori and David. They'll show you when to stand and where to turn. And it's really quite lovely, quite lovely. Ooh, let's put a capo on. Pnei Shabbat nekabela, dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela, lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela, lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Number one. שהמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם הוא תפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, Shabbat nekabela. Number 5. Hitoreri, kiva orechu miori, uri, shir daberi, kevod Adonai alayich nigla. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Number 9. Boi v'shalom ahateret ba'ala, gam besimcha uvtzola, toch emuna Ah, that was wonderful. All right. And now we're going to turn to page 142 for another song, Shalom Aleichem. Or you can say Alechem Shalom, because it's peace to you, and unto you there is peace. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon. Melech, Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You sound beautiful. Borechem Shalom, Malachei Shalom. Kadosh Baruch Hu, Maguri l'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lovely. I could hear your voices. So now we're going to start our service in earnest, where we actually engage God. We're talking to God. We're not talking about or musing or wishing, but we're talking to God, and that's why we do the bended knee, because we are humbled in the sight of God, in the presence. And so on page 146, we will do the Baruch Hu, which is one of those prayers where we bend the knee. Page 146, please rise. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. On the next page, stay rising, and we say this prayer together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, b'chochma poteach she'arim, uvitvuna mishane itim, umahalif et hazmanim, umsader et hakochavim, b'mishmereotechem b'arkia kirtzono. Borei yom v'layla golel or mipnei choshech vechoshech mipnei or. Uma'avir yom umevi layla umavdil ben yom uven layla. Adonai tzivaot shemo. El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed. Baruch ata Adonai hama'ariv aravim. And while we're still standing, we do the Shema directly to God's ear on page 152. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. You may be seated. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. The Mi Chamocha is the next prayer that we do. And this is not a rising prayer, but it is a very happy prayer because we are recounting when we did escape Egypt and how God showed God's itself to us for the first time. Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha neder b'kodesh, nora tehilot osef eleh, nora tehilot osef eleh. Malchutecha ra'u banecha bokei ayam, lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, ze Eli, ze Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. V'ne'emar kifada Adonai et Yaakov, uge'elo miyad chazak mimenu. Baruch atah Adonai Gal Yisrael. And now for a hope that God will not only bless us, but protect us and shield us and make sure that God spreads the shelter of peace over us and guides us in wisdom, compassion, and trust, and saves us for the sake of God's name and shields us from hatred, sorrow, and pain. Hashkivenu on page 160. 160. Amidenu malakenu Well done, everyone. And now we're moving on to the real meat and gravy, even though I don't eat meat, I don't know why I said that, to the part of the service where we really are thinking about specifics now, and we want to approach God. We want to talk to God. We want to tell God about who we are, who our ancestors were, who are our patriarchs, who were our matriarchs. We're spelling that all out for God in these next few prayers. So please rise on page 164, 164. Adonai sifata tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Eternal God, open my lips that my mouth may declare your glory. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu. Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leah, ve'Elohei Rachel, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, ve'Koneh Ha'akol, ve'Zocher Chasdei Achot ve'Imahot, u'Mevi Geula livnei v'neihem, Le'ma'an Shemo be'ahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magin, Baruch atah Adonai, Magin Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah. Ata Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh hakol atah, Rav lehoshia, Mashiv haruach, Umorid hagashem, Mechalkei chaim bechesed, Mechayeh hakol berachamim rabim, Somech noflim ve'rafeh cholim, Umatir asurim, Umakayem emunato lishenei afar. Mi chamocha ba'al givurot, umi domelach, melech memit umachayeh, umatzmiach Yeshua, v'ne'eman ata lechayot hakol. Baruch atah Adonai, mechayeh hakol. Ata kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, u'kdoshim b'chol yom yachalucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. And now you're going to have your own thoughts and your own meditations as you read through these next pages, and you have your own conversations with God. And when you're ready to go on with the service, when you've had your time, and you get to page 178, please sit down, and then I'll know that you're ready to go on. ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב, ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. כי אתה המלך אדון לכל השלום. כי אתה המלך אדון לכל השלום. שלום רב, ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב, ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב, ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב, ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. And now we're preparing ourselves for Seder Kriyat HaTorah, and we turn to page 362. And I'll tell you beforehand that we have a very special young man doing our blessings before the Torah, and for the Torah reading. And Maury is somebody that's come through our Sunday school for a long time, right? Were you there from kindergarten? 10 years. Come on up here, baby boy. And I'm so incredibly proud of him. And you wouldn't know it, but now he's a dad and a husband. And he was just such a fabulous, open-hearted, happy student. And whenever he'd come to music, you just had that look of, feed me.
Yes, that's a lot of fun.
So he's going to be doing the blessings, and that's there. And then, of course, I'm going to ask Joy Getzenberg to come up, and she's going to be reading Torah tonight. So I'm going to vamoose out of the way. And we're going to turn to page 362. And please rise as we open the ark door. Oh, you're skinny, Joey.
Yeah.
362. Ein kamocha ba'elohim Adonai, ve'ein ma'asecha, malchutecha malchut ka'olamim, u'mamshaltecha b'chador v'ador. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Adonai oz le'amor yitain, Adonai yivarech Beauteous. There she is. And the Torah is at rest, so you may sit. Let's see what happens now. Do you know what page it translates to in the regular?
I don't. I have English, but I didn't look in the Chumash because,
Let's see if we, oh, there it is.
yeah, I think
I'll be
so.
done. Okay.
It's Exodus. It's by era. It's chapter 6, verses 2 to 5. But I'm sorry, I don't have the page. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Page 351. It takes a village, as we've been saying all evening. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai havarach le'olam.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher natan lanu Torbanu mikol ha'amim. Thank you. Tan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vaydaber Elohim el Moshe. Vayomer elav ani Adonai. Ve'era el Avraham el Yitzchak ve'el Yaakov. Ba'al Shaddai, Ushmi Adonai, Lo Nodati Lahem, Vigam Hahutimi et Berit Atem Latot Lahem et Eretz Canaan, et Eretz Megar Hayom, Asher Garo Ba, Vigam Ani Shamati, et Naakat B'nei Yisrael, Asher Mitzrayim me'avadayim atam ve'askor et beriti. I'll read the English in there. Okay. God spoke to Moses and said to him, I am Adonai. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, but I did not make myself known to them by my name. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they lived as sojourners. I have now heard the moaning of the Israelites because the Egyptians are holding them in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Great job.
Actually, you can sit down and then come back because we're going to do the Misha Berach first. Hi, darling. Let's do the Misha Berach, and then we'll put the Torah up anyway, and then you'll do the Josh. Does that sound good?
You're in charge. I do whatever you tell me.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, so now we're not gonna close her and we're not gonna put her away, so there's no need to stand up. But we are gonna keep her in our midst while we do the Misha Berach prayer. And I have a list here of names that we are thinking of for the Misha Berach. And from our congregation, and then you'll have a chance to name some names as well of people that you think need this prayer, this Misha Berach prayer. So the people on our list for January 24th, the 25th of Tevet: Hannah Azna Bat Rivka Masha, Mina Daniel Smith, the Davis and Foote family, Keith Harrison, Francis Kippen, Alan Lezak, the Siegel family, Pam Sherman, John Seymour, Tali Stein, Tom Strickland. And if you have any names that you would like to call out to receive this prayer that we're about to do, please make a cacophony of sound. And then back in your prayer book, on page 371, you can find the Misha Berach prayer. And let us say, Amen, Amen. Ishebera imotenu mekor habracha le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Sure.
Okay, I'm gonna lift, so we're gonna stand.
Oh, you're doing that. Oh, okay.
No, you don't want me to?
Of course. I didn't know you wanted to.
I can.
I get lift now.
Well, do you want to do it since you read? Okay.
Please rise. V'zot haTorah asher sa Moshe livnei bnei Yisrael api Adonai v'yad Moshe. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la ya la 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 la, la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la ya la la ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Yes, honey. Ya la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. La 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, la 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 ya la la ya la 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 la. Hodo aretz v'shamayim, vayarem terem le'amo. So in case you need any, you may be seated.
Oh,
In
please.
case you need any introduction. This is
Nah,
Lily Amber.
they don't need any introduction.
They don't? Okay.
So, good Shabbos, everybody. So, tonight we're talking about the portion that Joy started off for us. Ve'era. That's Hebrew for, and I appeared. God appeared to Moses saying, I have heard the suffering of my people. He tells Moses to go and represent God to Pharaoh. That's the God of Israel. And Moses protests before taking the job, as we heard last week. And you know the rest, a lot of arguing, 10 plagues, division of the Red Sea, yada, yada, yada. Yes, Tony, I saw the movie. Yes, Tony, every year I rush through it with the kids at the Seder. Old news. I have heard the enslaving of the Israelites, this ancient story, for 61 Passovers, and I fear I have become blind and deaf to it. How can I do that? This is the central archetypal catastrophe of the Jewish people. Nothing like it has happened up to this point in the Torah. Adam and Eve take the forbidden fruit. We are forced to leave Eden. There is a flood with Noah, but these things happen to humanity at large. God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah, but that's them, not us. This is the first human-caused catastrophe that takes our entire people through no fault of our own. Let's recap. Joseph is raised to exalted position by none other than the Egyptian god on earth, Pharaoh. And Joseph proceeds to save the entire country. Did you catch that? He saves the entire nation of Egypt. In gratitude, Pharaoh welcomes Joseph's family to Egypt so that they too can be spared the famine. And for one of the first times in our history, but by no means the last, Jews set up shop in a foreign land, in this case, the land of Goshen, and they do really well. They reproduce a lot. They prosper. A lot of them assume Egyptian ways, and they are there 430 years. So now in the Exodus story, we are about to see the entire microcosm of the entire Jewish experience. Jews are invited. Jews give greatly to a country. Jews wind up being the political enemy. Jews wind up being expelled. And then the cycle starts again when they flee to where they can have a life. And it's interesting to note that the Jews, the Israelites, lived in Egypt for 430 years, approximately the length of time that the Jews first came to the United States of America 371 years ago. Also in this portion, Vayera tracks the family tree from Jacob to Moses. So Jacob's son is Joseph. You may recall that he had 11 brothers and 1 sister. And so we follow the line of Levi. Levi comes to Egypt at the age of 43 and lives to 137. After his death comes the Pharaoh who, as it is said in the Torah, knows not Israel and deems us a political threat and turns us into the enemy. Levi's son Kohath lives through this to the age of 133, and his son is Amram, the father of Moses. Moses is the prince of Egypt. He doesn't even know he's Jewish, but he comes to understand his cause, and when he is 80 years old, he is tapped to approach Pharaoh to free the Jews. So, according to the Torah, in just 4 generations, instead of the country being grateful for the Jews, they've demonized us, and we lose everything. We lose our rights. We are forced into slave labor of the worst sort to build cities in the desert heat. We're beaten and starved, and now our male children are murdered to prevent our numbers from growing. Male children tonight, raise your hands. Yep, that's you, right? Adonai deputizes Moses and Aaron to negotiate for an entire nation held hostage. Moses doesn't even tell Pharaoh that the real reason for his request is to go. It seems too hopeless. He doesn't say, "Let my people go." He says, "May we please go into the desert away from Egyptian eyes to worship our God." Pharaoh, who believes himself to be a god, is actually not terribly impressed by this, nor willing to comply. So, like in the movie Avatar, if you saw it, Adonai doesn't have armies of humans to fight for us. Adonai brings armies of animals and natural forces to give warning to Pharaoh. And at first, Pharaoh and the court are not impressed. Moses turns his staff into a serpent. The Pharaoh's wizards can do what Moses can, and they create serpents. Moses turns the Nile to blood. The wizards do the same. Moses brings frogs. The wizards bring more frogs. By the third plague, though, something changes. The wizards can't keep up. By the fourth plague, the Egyptians are the ones who are the recipients of the plagues, and the Israelites are not touched. If you've never read this portion, I beg you tonight, take a moment and read it before you leave, or go home and read it. It is gorgeous. It is stunning writing. The images of Moses conjuring each of these terrors, the negotiations for the nation held hostage, is remarkable, and you wonder, will he get us out? You can see why this has been done over and over again on stage and on screen. It's remarkable. Now, mind you, while Moses is conjuring each of these plagues, the Israelites are still slaves. And it is getting worse and worse. And their children are still being murdered if the midwives can't save them. Right? So the heat of the plagues must be turned up and up until we get to the slaying of the firstborn of Egypt. And as it says in the Torah, a cry goes up, such has never been heard before by the Egyptians, and only then will Pharaoh relent, and even then he doesn't relent. He sends the armies of Egypt to bring them back. And with each of these, there's this famous phrase, God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Why would such a thing happen? Pharaoh may have thought, we can only speculate, that he could withstand each round of suffering and not relent. He was more determined to win and dug in his heels because he couldn't believe his gods could lose. It's really hard to fathom until you look at the news today. So that's the mythical universe of the Torah. Let's suppose in this universe that the Israelis unilaterally withdraw from a strip of land along the Mediterranean. And what if that strip of land was taken over by a thuggish, anti-democratic, anti-woman, anti-gay Islamic government who is hell-bent on destroying Israel? And what if that government, instead of being possessed with the spirit of giving their people peace and gardens and prosperity, spent their efforts on weapons instead? And what if they attacked the Israelis and killed a bunch of their teenagers and did unspeakable things to their women and took hundreds of them by hostage to torture? Let's imagine several versions of today's story as Moses and Aaron are trying to negotiate for the hostages. So in one alternative universe, 476 days ago, the Hamas Pharaoh says, "Gosh, we are so sorry. Here are your hostages. Here are the criminals that did this. Here's restitution for your losses. By the way, we're turning over the criminals of Hezbollah who are plotting the same thing and building the same tunnels and acquiring the same weapons. And for good measure, here are the Houthis who are firing on civilian ships in the Red Sea instead of feeding their starving people. Go live in peace." Just kidding, that's not our universe. Then there's another universe in which the Israelis say, "We're so sorry. It must be our fault. Of course you were right to take our homes and to try to do this. We're going to respond peacefully and proportionately because we're adults who can handle trauma. Sure, killing our teenagers, not so great, but we'll get through it. And whatever you did to our women, no problem, because we believe that all women have the right to safety. just not Israeli women. There seems to be quite a silence out there when it comes to Israeli women. I'd love to tell you that I'm kidding about this version of the story, but it does seem to be circulating in some quarters. So we imagine that these negotiations begin 476 days ago in Qatar. Moses and Aaron start with the threat of a terrible plague of some sort, but the hearts of the captors have been hardened. We shoot a missile, they shoot missiles. We do something, and they do something. Their hearts are so hard that they plant missile launchers in the Boy Scout Center in Gaza City, using children to be a military target as their shield. They will use hospitals with wounded people and infants in NICUs as fodder for the headlines and hide munitions and hostages beneath the floors. Their hearts are so hard that they will steal the humanitarian aid sent to help their people. Their hearts are just hard enough that they will murder a 23-year-old hostage from Evanston who is a friend of our cantor and never did anything to them. And just like Exodus, we try to avoid destruction of innocent people. Notice that in the Exodus story, the plagues first hurt animals and crops. People may be incapacitated by disease, but not outright killed. And so the attempt is not to hurt innocent people. And I'm imagining in the Exodus story the biblical news headlines about that terrible Moses and how awful those Jews were in Egypt. Can you imagine destroying the water, bringing about cattle disease and locusts and the like? Whatever the Egyptians did to them, surely the response should be peaceful and proportionate. So until this week, it seemed that no matter what happened, they would keep our people hostage until a cry went up that had not been before or since. Except it turns out that's not enough either. This week, we rejoiced in the release of the first 3 hostages in the ceasefire. However, according to the Times of Israel, during the first 42-day phase, Hamas will release a total of 33 Israeli hostages, women, children, elderly, wounded, or sick men, not all of whom are alive. Israel, in turn, will release up to 1,904 Palestinian security prisoners and detainees, including more than 150 terrorists convicted of murder and several serving multiple life sentences for deadly terror attacks. So I'm imagining those biblical pundits on the ancient cable stations back in Exodus times. Well, if the Egyptian Hebrew slaves are released, surely all the people who enslaved them and beat them in the fields, they should be released too. Can you imagine the early Egyptian college students staging protests on how terrible the Jews were for bringing plagues? Oh, and the deaths of those Jewish kids? Never mind that. How could you take the Egyptian firstborn? So on and on it goes. Even after 61 Passover retellings, I, who have been graced by the good fortune of my people in America, have become blind and deaf to this most central of American dilemmas. And if you are uncomfortable listening to this, you should be. It's uncomfortable. It's not a sweet Passover story. This is life and death of our people over and over again. How do we accept the gracious invitation to settle in a place and bring it prosperity without keeping an eye on the exit? To what lengths must we go to rescue our people when it goes bad? How do we balance our freedom with the deaths of others? This story has gone on multiple times in the Torah and continued all the history since. Jews were taken in chains to Babylonia and welcomed back to Israel from Persia in the time of King Cyrus. We were taken in chains by the Romans in the sack of the Second Temple. We spread through the Roman Empire as merchants and traders, and some went back to Israel. We lived in Egypt and Tehran and Damascus for millennia, only to finally be driven out in our lifetimes. And in the West, Jews were expelled from England in 1290, France in 1304, Spain in 1492, and Portugal thereafter. The Portuguese Inquisition sending those first Jews first to Brazil and then to New York. All we wanted to do was go where we were welcome. And by the way, you know, there's all this discussion of indigenous rights and indigenous people. How long do we have to live somewhere before we're indigenous? Just interesting side note. We've lived in places like Persia and Iraq and Yemen so long that it is longer than the native Hawaiians have lived in Hawaii, longer than the Maori have lived in New Zealand, and in some places as long as the most ancient Chinese empires. When do we get to be the indigenous people? Today, tiny modern Israel is 71 miles wide and 263 miles long. That's about as wide as Chicago to Racine and about as long as Chicago to Detroit. It's got the same total population as the Chicago metro area. It's half-empty desert and scrub, and for some reason, our little tiny homeland is the target of competing empires. We come home, we get driven out by war or famine, and return over and over. Exodus after exodus after exodus. What I can't fathom is, how did we do this in the 19th and 20th centuries? How did we absorb the thousands of Jews fleeing the Cossacks and the pogroms? By 1939, the Jewish population of what would become Israel was over 400,000. In the first 8 years after World War II, another 730,000 escaped Europe and North Africa. Entire Jewish communities were evacuated that were at risk. Yemen, who'd been there since the 6th century, most of Persia, Iraq, Libya. After the war, Romanian dictators made Israel pay ransom money per person to bring them out. How did we find the money, the flights, the clothes, the food? How did this poor, barely extant country do it? Exodus after exodus. How did we bring out the 1 million plus in the USSR? How did we rescue almost the entire Ethiopian Jewish community? Exodus after exodus. How many of you here are 50 years or older? Hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Do we have an eighth? Okay, 8. Okay. Jews came to America 371 years ago. That's the life of 8 50-year-olds back to back. By the way, I'm the 9th. Right? Just in this group of people, we have as many years of life as Jews have been in America. Pharaoh's Egypt turned on the Jews. Could that happen to us? The time from Hitler being appointed Germany's chancellor to the time of the final solution was 13 years. The U.S. turned us away, by the way, in those 13 years, and we got sent to places like Mexico, Cuba, and other places in the Gulf of America. Good, you caught that. And there were no plagues to save us. No God stood up for us. No cargo planes to airlift us. In 1939, there were no planes to airlift us. Had there been in Israel, like there was in 1949, 1 million or more could have been saved. How quickly could it turn? How quickly could we be forgotten? How quickly will the left wing blame us for the loss of the election and blame Israel for trying to get our people back? And that's a trick question because many already have. How quickly will the right-wing white supremacists remember that we are not white? Trick question. They never forget. So do I have hope? Does this story give me hope? I have conditional hope. And that is, we are the ultimate survivors and thrivers. When we look out for each other, when we take care of each other, when we remember how important Jewish groups and Jewish institutions and Jewish voting blocs and, yes, Jewish countries are. I have hope. I have hope. Do we feel like we can do that? Do we feel like we're being intimidated into silence? I do. I feel like there's a lot of pressure to shut up. It's not popular to be proud and open for being a Jew, and certainly not one that supports Israel. So if you feel it, I do too. But I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to apologize for Israel and the Jews. It won't matter to the naysayers anyway. They don't want apologies. They want, from the river to the sea, Judenrein, free of Jews. So I think we need to do what we do. Look out for each other. Support places like this. Support Jewish institutions. And then I think we've got another 3,000 or 4,000 years on us. Exodus after Exodus after Exodus. Shabbat Shalom.
Tony, thank you. That indigenous part really got to me. I had never thought about that. Thank you for somehow seamlessly taking the story of Exodus and our modern day trials and tribulations and putting them in this order chronologically to see it, to examine it. It's stunning and terrible. Thank you so much. So we're going to bring our service to a close. I know all these thoughts must be running around in your head like crazy, and I'm sure you want to talk about it and discuss it further, as you should. And as Tony said, if you're uncomfortable with it all, you should be. And I hope that these thoughts bring you to the rest of Shabbat to think about it and to come to some resolution for yourself. And yes, we're going to take care of each other. And yes, as I look at you all and you look back at me, we're in this together. So let's end our service together and go about our Shabbat and remember that we're all here for each other. You're not alone. You ain't alone. Let's turn to page 586 in our prayer book and rise for the Aleinu as we bless God and thank God for all that we have at this moment in time. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. Please be seated. Lastly, for our service, we are commanded to remember our dead as we take care of ourselves and each other alive. And so we come to Yisker, the part of our service where we do remember people in your lives, people in the congregation's life. And we turn to page 598. And I have a list of our own yard sites for tonight. And then, of course, I'll give you a chance if there's anybody in your family that you would like to call out for this being a yard site. For January 24th, the 25th of Tevet, these are the observances. Gisela Amster, Sidney Blankstein, Howard Bloom, Leo Bonham, Harris Braverman, Alan Richard Bush, Milton Fink, Morris Friedman, Paul Haberkamp, Bernard D. Hirsch, Doretta Hoffman, Max Hyman, Simon Lax, Isidore Lerner, Sidney Mogul, Edward Morris, William Phillips, Maximilian Poehler, Marilyn Roberts, Joseph Rostker, Kate H. Schneider, Joseph Schwartz, Pete Seeger, Anna Sells, Francis J. Solon, Jacob J. Sommerfeld, Samuel J. Steiner, Jacob Van Emden, Edna Weil, Betty Weissman, Louis Zanville, Lillian Zevin, and in recent days, Nathan Bosson, Alvin Davis, Zelda Magdul, Ilse Siegler, and Maria Strachey. Are there any other names of yard sites that you would like for us to think of right now? For those of you that are acknowledging a yard site, we're going to have you rise first so that we can send you all of our support and our love. And then if it is your custom, please rise on page 598 for the Yizkor prayer, for the mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon, u'v'chayeh d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imeru, Yehe Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam Olmei Almaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitale V'yitalal Shmei D'Kudesha Brihu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechremata Da'amiran Be'alma V'imeru Amen. Yehesh lama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru. Amen. And we think of our loved ones, and may their memories be for a blessing. You may be seated. Thank you to Tony. Thank you to Joy. Thank you to Maury. And Jack and Noah, thank you for your time and your know-how. Thank you, Lori and David, for lighting our candles for us today. And thank you all for being here tonight. It's so meaningful to have you all here. Now it's Shabbat. As I see your faces, now it's Shabbat. Next week, there are 18 women, including our cantor, who is going to Azrui for the Women's Retreat weekend, where we'll be studying. Very similar drash to what Tony was talking about. It's the next parsha that we'll be engrossed in. And so there will be services next week, of course, but Shelley nor I will be here. But we hope that you will, if you can get here and you feel that, please come. And we're going to have a closing song that is on page 595. You want to come up here, Lori? It's called Yesh Kochavim. It actually has number 7 next to it. Let's do the English, okay?
Yeah, oh, okay.
2, 3.
There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light. Long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we love. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is gone. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember. We remember. We remember. Thank you.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.